All right, so we are in for a 1 day model project today. This is a hobby project that I've been wanting to work on for a long time. I've always been fascinated with World War One, particularly trench warfare. There's something very awful about it, and yet heroic at the same time that I've always been intrigued by. Where it was, I mean, the pictures that you see of it are so awful and violent, and yet the bravery of the men to not only be witnesses to such horrible things, but then be willing to go up the ladder and go over the top and climb into no man's land. And it is just, it's pretty heroic when you think about it. I mean, awful, but pretty heroic. So, this is a kit that I got to put together. I love the 1/35th scale miniatures because they come in so many interesting poses compared to what I normally do, which are wargame miniatures. And wargame miniatures come in combat poses, whereas these 1/35th scale miniatures come in scene poses. They're about to do something. That guy right there, he is the commander. He has got his gun up and he is checking his watch, getting ready for the time to go over the top. And so there are five guys in this kit, and four soldiers. Four privates and one commander. I don't know what his designation is, but he is ordering them to go over the top and waiting to count down. We have one guy who is about to climb over the top, and then the other guys who are waiting for their chance to go up the ladder. But this is a really fun 1 day build. Now, I've mentioned on this channel that I am not a painter. This is not a painting channel. And so I'm sure that there are people who would watch this who would say, who would be horrified at the fact that I am painting five miniature 1/35th scale miniatures, no less, but five miniatures in a 1 day build project. But I am not a great painter. I don't claim to be a great painter. I am a terrain maker. I am a miniatures maker, and painting has never been a strong point with me. I don't have great dexterity in my hands. I have numbness in two of my fingers, and so I struggle with intricate detail painting. Granted, there are often times where I do a lot more detailed work than this, but this was a project that I wanted to kick out in 1 day and get done with. So, painting these guys up using Vallejo paints. This is the color English uniform, which is perfect for this, for these doughboys. Painting them up. So I'm using a wet palette, which is something that I have picked up in about the last probably 9 months. I've heard so much about wet palettes for years now, probably going back 3 or 4 years of painting. I've heard about wet palettes and about how great they are, and never realized it until I finally dove in what a game changer they are. A wet palette is basically a sponge that you put a piece of parchment paper over the top of, and it keeps your paint wet while you work. So it doesn't dry out. You're not. I mean, you're that dollop of paint that I just put down on the palette there. That will stay wet for days. Um, the sponge that you put down is very wet. I mean, it's soaked through, and they stay wet for a long time. And really, if you haven't invested in in a wet palette. You can get one for, I think this one is like $11 on Amazon, and absolutely worth it. So now I've got these guys painted. They're not gonna win any golden demons or crystal brushes, but they're good enough for the work that I need. I love the poses on them. That's the guy who's going over the top. And we've got the last guy here who is putting his hand on the ladder about to climb up. So now we've got a problem. We have run into a bit of a crash. I lost some film. I lost the film where I built the diorama. So basically, we've got the plastic bit, which is the trench, and that came with the kit. And then the wood sides I carved out of a piece of birch plywood with a jigsaw. And then the ends, you can see, are covered with blue XPS foam. So that is how it all assembles together. The plastic kit only came with the trench and didn't come with any weight for the trench to support itself. So I had to build this diorama around it. But you can see this is going to be a small diorama. This is like a 5-inch by 6-inch trench. I'm putting on Sculptamold now. Sculptamold hideth a multitude of sins, and that's what it's doing here. Is it is covering up all the seams between the plastic and the wood, but it is also being a texture of the mud. You can see me putting it down there at the bottom of the trench, and that's just because I want. This is going to be the texture of the churned up earth of the no man's land. Now I'm putting on some paint here, and this paint is actually not. I'm putting not down for the color of this paint, although I am going to spray paint this brown, but this is just to protect the XPS foam, because you can't spray paint that foam or it will chew through it. I don't know the chemicals in spray paint, but they will eat through XPS foam. So I'm just painting it brown. Now I've spray painted it all, and putting in some detail work, painting some sandbags. There isn't a lot of detail work in this diorama as far as individual things to paint, because in a World War I trench, everything was just drenched in mud and muck, and it was all filthy. And so most of the color that I'm going to have in this thing is going to come from the mud paste that I use, but more importantly, the weathering pigments. So I put in that. This is actually, I said it was a 1-day project. It's actually a 2-day project, because this is now the next day. And I painted all those sandbags and then put a heavy wash of Agrax Earthshade on them over the whole thing, so that it would just darken everything up so we could get some good highlights. And now I'm going to dry brush it to bring out those highlights. If you watched my favorite things of 2020 episode, one of my favorite things was using these makeup brushes as dry brushes, instead of using the specially made hobby dry brushes that they sell for $11 for a dry brush from Games Workshop. You can get a hobby or a makeup brush from Walgreens, or I got these on Amazon. You can get a whole pack of them for $3, and they work so much better. And now it's interesting. You can actually see that some of these paint companies, I think Army Painter in particular, are coming out with their own line of dry brushes that look exactly like this makeup dry brush, but it's a Army Painter branded dry brush that is a makeup brush. But I love this aspect of of the hobby project. I love dry brushing it because that is really where stuff starts to pop out. You start to see that texture, and it looks really good. So, and there you can't really see it here, but there's good wood grain in that siding. So it all comes together, and I'm really, really happy with it. A few last minute touch ups, and then it'll be time for the mud paste. The mud paste I use in, I mean, everything, as you've seen on this channel. This is a Vallejo product. I believe the color is called European Mud, so that's appropriate. But it is just a thick, muddy paste that is good for both texture and for covering up seams and for the color of it. It just is really good. It comes in lots of different colors, but this is my favorite one. And then I'm going to put in the figures after this and affix them in place, and then turn to the weathering pigments, because that's where the real color will come into the project. So now it's time to fix the figures in. And I'm doing these before I put in the weathering pigments because I want the pigments to be on their feet and on their boots, because in a trench everything was so filthy and muddy. I want that to be reflected with the weathering pigments. And I love these poses that these guys are in. So now I've got the weathering pigments out. Now these pigments are also a Vallejo product. I believe this came as a 4 pigment set that I'm using here, and I can't remember the name of the set, but I think it is something to the effect of Churned Earth, which is very appropriate for World War II. So it's all burnt siennas, burnt umber. There's a charcoal color. That's what I'm going to use here, is charcoal. These go on as thick powders. I mean, they're the consistency of like a baking soda. But you put them on, and then when you spray it with varnish to protect the whole diorama at the end, the powder fixes in place, and it doesn't, I mean, you don't have like loose powder falling around your diorama. So this is the final product. Thank you for sticking with me to the end. I'm really happy with how this turned out for a quick one-day project that didn't require a lot of effort, a lot of time. Just something fun to do on a weekend. I did this over the course of a Saturday and part of a Sunday, and I think that it really turned out nice. It'll look like something nice on the corner of my desk. Anyway, if you like what you've seen, I'd love you to support the channel. If you could like, share, and subscribe. And if you're not a patron, I've got a Patreon with some awesome perks. And then also, if you don't want to become a patron, you can always use the Buy Me a Coffee tab. I don't drink coffee, but it'll buy me a tube of paint. So those links are in the description below. Thanks so much for watching. In the meantime, stay safe, wear your masks, and we'll see you later.